Hey there, listener. It's Keith Hayden, the digital novelist. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Novelist Podcast. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different than I normally do. This is going to be more of a review or reflection, so to speak, on this week of my writing. And I don't know, maybe I'll continue this format in the future, but I felt like I wanted to do a little bit of both. I wanted to talk about some of the things that I learned this week from doing just a ton of writing. And then I also wanted to talk about why maybe if you're a fiction author, primarily, especially if you're a novelist, why you're not getting as much writing done as you probably should be doing. I'm going to go into some of the reasons that I've seen interacting with other fiction writers recently, and I want to talk about some ways you can maybe overcome these things that hold you back. Because I can tell you, I've been there, I've been in the trenches. I'm there almost every day, and it's frustrating when you're not getting as much done as you want. So I'm gonna start with the download of this week. This week was, man, I've probably written more fiction this week in total than I have at least all year. This is probably the most I've done as far as finished works, not just working on a main project. I'm going to start with my primary project, which is my novel, Gates of Okinawa. That's where I've been spending a huge chunk of my time, and this week was it was just a really explosive week when it came to writing. I wrote chapters 40 through 43 this week, and I'm in the second draft of this project. I officially passed the 6-month mark last week, I think, of working on this project pretty much every day for the past 6 months. It's been a wild ride. I've come a long way. I think I'm at about 56,000 words in the manuscript, and it's just getting better and better every time I go along. It's just really exciting to see because it's past that rough phase where you're just kind of spraying things onto the page or onto the screen. This is the refinement phase. Traditionally, this was a harder phase for me. I really didn't used to enjoy editing so much. It's just kind of a slog. I remember my first novel, it was, man, I really just dreaded it. Every time I had to sit down and be like, okay, where am I going to take this? I don't have as many of those reservations anymore, and it's gotten a lot easier to go back, but it hasn't gotten any faster. I think on average, I probably spend at least 3.5 hours for each chapter. That's a lot of time. That's about 3.5 hours a day just working on a single chapter. And this, of course, is the second draft, so there's even more per chapter. But I'm really happy with the way these chapters have come out. I have an announcement, by the way, when it comes to Gates of Okinawa, and this is kind of leads into talking about some of the other writing that I did. But this entire time, since August, I've been posting all the chapters of Gates of Okinawa for free, the ones I complete, onto Wattpad. This was a huge experiment for me, just to build in public, so to speak. I'd never really done this with a full novel before, just posting it to where anybody could see it, but there's a reason why. Primary reason is it's awareness. To get people to know that my writing exists, to expose them to my writing style, and of course the story. But since I'm about at the halfway point, a little over halfway, I think I'm pretty much done with this phase. Not that I can't say that it's been a success by any stretch of the word. I have gotten a few readers of it, and it actually does rank on Wattpad. I don't know how Wattpad does their rankings, but it's reached a level of ranking in certain categories on Wattpad just based on the views. Haven't gotten too many views. I think I'm at like 77 which for 43 chapters of a full novel is not that great. But it's more about, I'm putting a lot of time. I've put a ton of time into this novel at this point, and I'm ready to move people back to my site. Because right now you can read it and you don't have to even sign up for email. You don't have to do anything. It's just out on Wattpad. But I think I'm done with that phase. So up till chapter 43, until the book is done, that's going to be the last chapter that you can read for free. The rest of it, if you're interested in reading Gates of Okinawa, go to my website, keithhayden.net, and I've redone my sign up. The Digital Novelist Explorer Kit has since been archived. It's probably the polite way to say that you ain't gonna find that shit no more. It's not there anymore. And I'll talk about why in a second. But if you are interested in reading a very innovative supernatural horror novel that combines Japanese folklore, American culture with supernatural elements, it's kind of a blend of a lot of different things, then head over to my website and check it out. Let me talk about more of the other writing that I did this week. This week was huge because I'm still very active in the fiction writing school that I've been active in for the past 3 weeks now. It's going very well. And because of that, I've been writing a lot of short stories. This week, I wrote 4 short stories, and I just want to talk about them briefly, and then I'll talk about what I learned from writing all of these short stories. The first short story that I wrote was Catch. Catch is an interactive horror short story. This is an interesting experiment for this one because it's interactive. So what does it mean by interactive? Well, that means there's some choice in there, and that was interesting to integrate choice into a short story. I'd never done it before, but I think it works well here where it's at. I like the way it just kind of has it's more of like an insidious type of horror. It just kind of creeps up on you, and you're in the forest in the north, and it's very much inspired by times that I've been in the northern forests of Okinawa, and it's a surreal experience because the world just kind of closes in on you, and there's nothing else there but just the oppressiveness of the humidity, the heat, the mosquitoes, the bugs, the spiders. It's not a very friendly place. That sounds like a great place for a horror short story. So I really enjoyed this one, and I hope you do too. Second short story I wrote was Red-Handed. Red-Handed, man, this was a fun one. I called it a climate horror short story because it involves a Japanese woman, a middle-aged Japanese woman who's kind of over her job, but it's kind of her job to be an environmental consultant for a construction company that is clearing land to make way for a luxury hotel. This happens often in Okinawa, and it's only happening more. I saw it a lot when I was there. And so I thought it would be great to explore this common thing that happens in the island with a horror story. This is also the first story that it officially takes place in the world building of Gates of Okinawa, and that's what I wanted to do with these short stories. I wanted to integrate different Japanese demons and folklore into these stories to tie in, because that's a big part of Gates of Okinawa, to tie into Gates of Okinawa. So I thought it would be very fun to do that, and this was the first one that I did. I think if you like, this one's more of in your face, so it's more of like I don't want to say a typical monster tale, but it does have a little bit of Japanese creepiness, but then there's definitely a part to where it's just straight up monster, and it just becomes chaos, which is a good contrast to the third short story I wrote this week, Through His Eyes. Through His Eyes is an epistolary horror short story, and this one is I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at the little art that I made to promote the story, and the monster that I conjured is just, it's just hellish. It's some of the worst. Oh, just the eyes. It's perfect for the story, but even me having created it, it just gives me chills. But what I have found fun about this story was it's epistolary. So it takes place over a series of emails. You get this older contractor who's been called back to Okinawa. He's an occult investigator, and his brother's involved in some dirt. And he's reluctant to get involved, but he gets caught up in it. There's a very, very strange Japanese demon that is a part of the story that you just kind of have to read about to see. And yeah, I really love the epistolary format just because it has mystery built in between these different pieces of communication. You have to kind of fill in the gaps between what happened in between just by default. So I really like this mode of storytelling. It's not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite of the ones that I wrote last week, but it's still good. I think it's really good. The last short story that I wrote was Black Clouds. Black Clouds, man, by far this is my favorite of all four. A mystery horror short story. I think it's my favorite because I feel like the protagonist, I don't want to say he's the most colorful, but I don't know, I really had fun writing him, and this kind of cynical military guy who's in Okinawa. He doesn't really want to be there. He's in this really crappy rundown apartment that he suspects is haunted, and guess what? I think you can kind of guess what happens. It's a horror story after all. But there's a huge twist in the middle that I just won't spoil, but I think I like this because I was able to throw in some of those moments of, if you read my writing, I like to keep things light. That's just the way I am in person. So I get to throw some humor in there. I get to throw some funny things, get to talk about trash talk Duolingo Japanese a little bit, and talk about some callbacks to Okinawa, like certain types of food, certain types of beer. I got to throw those little hints in to where, if you've ever been to Japan and spent any amount of time there, certainly if you were in the military and you were there, you will recognize some of the things in there. And the story is just, it's kind of a classic monster story, but that mystery is in there, and I really like the way I did it. And that's it from these short stories. So I mentioned before I started talking about them that I had kind of a lesson that I wanted to, that I learned after doing this much writing and sending it out. Because this week also coincided with my soft departure from X, Twitter, as my primary social media. I let my premium lapse, and I just, I still post over there, but I can't post as much, and I just don't go on there as much as I did. But what I've learned is that people are much more interested in my stories than they are in writing advice or how to write a novel or digital novelist toolkit, anything like that. And this just makes sense because, I do this every day. So writing fiction is hard. It's a difficult thing, and I'll get into that when I talk about some of the ways that it's difficult might be for you if you're a fiction writer to finish your writing. But it's hard. And it's one of those things that's very hard to coach too, because unlike other things like sales or marketing or software, there's no set path. Like, if I coached you in writing, it would be to coach you to write more like you. But you can't write more like you if you don't write. So it's kind of this thing to where if somebody's offering coaching services in this, I don't know how they're doing it exactly, but it's very difficult because, if I really coach somebody as a fiction writer, my role would probably be as like an editor or something, a proofreader, that type of thing, giving advice, saying, hey, you could flesh this out, this could be clearer, that type of thing. If that's something that you're interested in, I do offer that, but I'll be honest, I haven't had anybody bite on it, and I'm not exactly like looking for people to do that, just because it's, like I said, I think it takes a certain type of person to want and really benefit from that type of a service. So that's just not where I'm at right now. So note taken, write more finished stories and do less of the coaching thing and, hey, do you want to write a novel, that type of thing. It's not what people want, at least not from me. So I'll take that, because everything has gone up. My Substack's gone up, my opens on my email has gone up. It's just, I don't know, people are reading my stories, and I'm not sure if it's out of curiosity. I haven't had that level of feedback yet, but at least they're reading, and that's a good sign. Now I want to transition to talking about, and I have them written down here, so this isn't too long, hopefully, but I want to talk about some of the ways that maybe you're not getting as much writing done as you want to, and if you want to get more writing done, then these should be probably helpful for you. And I'm going to start with the number one thing that I've seen lately that every time I see it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised that you haven't either finished your novel or you're not making progress on your long-term project, even if it's just a short story. And it's because you have too damn many projects going on. I probably read at least 3 or 4 times that people have multiple projects going on, like novel projects going on. And I understand everybody's different, but keep in mind when you divert your attention like that, because novels, I just know how much time and focus and energy I've put into my latest novel project. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of intent that's going into that one project. I can't imagine that splitting that 4 ways, 3 ways, even 2 ways. I think it's too much. You can't, you're getting inspiration for different parts of different stories, but you're moving at a very slow speed toward each one. And it's frustrating because you're not developing each one. And I get it. This goes back to, I talked to a friend on his podcast about this. The longer you spend with a certain project, the harder it's going to get, because you're going to get deeper in, you're going to get lost, you're not going to be sure, where do I take the story now? Where do I take the characters? Depending on, even if you had a strong outline, I outline all of my long form fiction, and it only takes about usually 3 or 4 chapters to where, okay, that outline is just kind of, it's not useful anymore. It's not, because the story starts going a different direction. You start adding things, you add characters, and you get more of a clarity the further that you go in, but it also gets harder. It gets harder to sustain that, because maybe you only had a seed of an idea to start with, and now that idea is kind of running out of gas, and you're like, now what? Where does this story go? What's the point? What am I trying to say? That's hard. So what do? Well, I've done it in the past too. You switch to another project where, okay, this feels easier. It feels simpler to just pick up where this story left off, but then rinse and repeat, right? The same thing happens. So I'd challenge you, if you're really resonating with this, what I'm saying for these past few minutes, then I challenge you to take the chance. I understand it feels risky to put down, especially when you've been juggling so many projects for so long. It feels risky to put it down, because part of you is afraid that, well, if I put it down, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back to it. And I know that feeling. But if the idea is strong enough, and even if it's not, you will. But in order to give the one that is the most priority, the one that you feel the strongest about right now, a chance to really grow and shine into its own thing and be able to finish it, then it's going to be easier to put the others aside. And I say, try this for a minimum week. Try going 1 week just working on the most important idea that you have. And if it feels shitty, if you feel like I really got to go back to those other ones, then okay, try the same thing with another one and see what happens. But what you're probably going to find is you're going to see yourself start making progress over that week. This is assuming that you're writing every day, by the way. Hopefully you are. But you're going to see yourself making progress, and that's going to feel a little good. Maybe you got 1 or 2 chapters done that week. And okay, wow. And then maybe next week, 2 more and 2 more. And then that stacks. And then all of a sudden, X amount of weeks, months later, you have your draft done. Or you have your second draft or your nth draft, whatever. You've got to try that. The second reason you're not getting as much writing done is you just don't write enough. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I just for my novel, for one chapter, I've at an average done 3.5 hours a day, and that's just writing on the novel. On this week, this was Halloween week, so this was a perfect week to capitalize for horror stories. So I wanted to get out as many short stories as I could, and each short story probably was another 4 or 5 hours for me to from start to finish. So add that up. That's about 8 hours a day writing, which is probably Monday through Wednesday this week. That's probably what I put in. It's a lot of work. How many hours do you spend writing? Really think about that and be honest with yourself, because a lot of times we like to lie to ourselves, right? Let's say, well, I wrote some notes or I did this, and it was kind of writing. I thought about my manuscript. I outlined a little bit. I talked to somebody about it. But how much did you actually put on the screen or write in your notepad, however you write? Don't fool yourself with this number, because I guarantee you it's not high enough, especially if your goal is to finish a novel. I'm not going to tell you how many words you should be putting in a day because it's different for everybody, but you should be sitting there for a while getting out something, and if you get stuck, you can take a break, you can go read something, get something to eat, whatever you do, and then come back and hit it again. You just got to write more, bottom line. The third reason why you don't get enough done or you don't do as much writing as you should is lack of confidence. It's that feeling that we get every time we sit down as writers. And it's that feeling of, can I do this again? Can I, sit down and come up with something coherent, something that I'm happy with, something that makes sense to somebody else if you're writing for other readers, which I'm assuming you are. If you are writing for other people to read your stuff. If not, you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But it's that lack of confidence. And I'm going to tell you, that doesn't go away. Even for me, it doesn't. Every time I sit down, especially now at this phase that I'm in my second draft of my novel, and every time I'm like, for certain chapters, it's like, oh my God, this is going to take hours of either straight up rewrites or plucking words out, putting stuff in. It's going to take a while. And that can be intimidating. That can be just devastating on your ego. And it can just kind of crush you and make you not want to even try. Or maybe you're newer, and I've seen a lot of clues that this is how a lot of newer writers think, because I remember thinking this at one point when I was newer, that my stuff's just not good enough. And I know it's not good enough. I read stuff that's good, and what I'm writing is not good. But I saw this on a Reddit post just maybe a few hours ago as I was preparing for this. And there's really no way to get past that my writing's not good phase other than writing more. It's not reading more. It's not thinking about reading. It's not all any of these other things. It's not getting a coach. It's not hiring somebody. because they can't coach or edit what's not there. And if you're not writing because of a lack of confidence or imposter syndrome or something like that, then the only way through it is to do it more. And yeah, your first few drafts are not going to be, they're not going to fit that vision that you have in your head. That's okay. I can tell you mine didn't either for my first novel. It definitely happens. You just keep writing and it's going to come easier. It's going to get better. That's the only way to get through it. The last reason why you don't finish your writing, you don't do enough writing, is procrastination by what I call unproductive means. I've hinted at this throughout this episode, but I'm going to say it clearly here. Reading is not writing. Thinking about what you're going to write is not writing. Talking to others, whether it's in person, online, is not writing. Writing is writing. That's it. And you get better at writing by writing. That's the best way. These other things can help you. Sometimes it's fun to talk to friends online or share, get advice, share things that you've written or ideas you have with other people. It's fun to outline and come up with ideas. And reading is fun. It's its own enrichment, and it definitely helps you become a better writer. But I'd say even reading is probably half as effective at making you a better writer than just sitting down and writing something. Even if what you write is terrible and not very thought out, it's not very clear, it's still better practice. But the procrastination is one of those things. If you know you want to write, then you have to sit down and write. Daydreaming about it, or I don't know what else you can do besides write. There's a lot of other things you can do besides write, but they're not helpful. They don't help you write more. Those are the 4 things that I wanted to go over. And I think the biggest one is having too many projects, y'all. It's too much. You've got to let some things go. And I know how hard this is because I used to be a serial dabbler. I still kind of am, but I've pulled back on that recently. This year, I've made a huge effort to focus on my writing, to focus on areas of improvement that I really care about, and the results have been amazing. I've written and published 5 books this year. Gates of Okinawa will be my 6th. I've journaled every day this year. I've kept up with online communities. I've grown my craft. I've read several books. It's been a really good year from a writing perspective for me. Why do I bring all this up? It's not to brag or boast, but it's just to show you the power of focus that it can have in the long run when you let other things fall away. And that's what I've done. Like, I'm not doing any podcast. Well, I am doing podcast stuff. Like, I'm still putting out this podcast, but I'm not doing as much extra things as I was last year. I'm not doing any music. I'm not doing as much social media. I'm not doing as many things with AI or code or things like that. It's been really about improving my craft as a writer. And I know that you would benefit from the same level of focus. What things can you let fall away, or how can you prioritize your writing over the other things in your life that, of course, you can control and you have control over, that you can kind of dial back? Think about that, and you'll get more writing done. That's going to be it for this episode of the Digital Novelist Podcast. Thanks a lot for joining me and listening to my progress and listening to these random writing thoughts. I hope they were helpful for you. If you are interested in my supernatural horror novel, go ahead and check out keithhayden.net. Gates of Okinawa. We're officially in what should be launch month. I'm hoping to launch by the end of this month. and be done with it, but I don't know. We'll see. It might be a Christmas release, but I definitely plan to get it done by the end of this year. But if you want to read the full manuscript from now on, you can still check out. I'm not going to take down the chapters that I have up on Wattpad. I'm just going to leave them up there because I just don't feel like taking them down. But from now on, beginning tomorrow, you're only going to be able to read the rest of it on my website, through my website. So I hope you head over there, and I'll be putting out more short stories. I'm really enjoying putting out these short stories to expand the world of Gates of Okinawa, and I hope you're enjoying reading them. I will see you next time on this podcast. Oh, I forgot about one last thing. This Sunday, I will be a featured author during an event called Dime Grinds. Dime Grinds is a local event that showcases mostly indie authors, but I guess there's some more famous authors that come through. But I'll be there reading a chapter or part of my chapter from my first military game tech fiction novel, Sirius and Limnic's Second Evolution. It's going to be so exciting. I'll be talking about my writing journey, answering your questions. Yeah, just come through and say hi. You can find information about it on my website, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast, and I'll see you in the next one.